Fifthly, young ladies should see their mothers, and this is an interesting one. Verse 5, third word in, discreet, chaste homemakers. Now that's really nice as a word. It's nice on a plaque on the wall. It's nice to see as a title of a book, but it's really hard to do. Just for a minute, let me just share with you what this word means, because it's amazing. A woman's responsibility is to be in the home because it is a place where she can have the greatest impact on the world by raising godly men and women. And God's plan for women centers around their home and family. This little phrase, workers at home, is translated from the little word oik urgos. Oikos is house and ergos is work. Ergon doesn't simply mean labor in general. It's usually, this word ergon speaks of a task that's very focused. Now, keep your finger here, and I want to show you how Jesus used this word. Look at chapter 4 of the Gospel by John. John 4. This is really neat when you think of this. This, in fact, for me, this captures how this verse can be fulfilled in our lives. John chapter 4 and verse 34. We're looking at the word ergon because what Paul describes a woman as a house ergon. The house is her ergon. Now, what is ergon? Well, it's not just labor in general. It's a particular job, and it's the word Jesus used when he said this, 4:34. My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his ergon. There's that word, work. Ergon. Now think about this. Our Lord focused his entire life on fulfilling God's will. That's what Jesus' marching orders were. His whole life, he kept saying, I didn't come to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. Not my will, but thine be done. It just comes out all the time. He's saying, God, even when he didn't agree with it. Now, I'm not going to get into the, inner Trinitarian discussion and all of that stuff. But from our perspective in the garden, Jesus said, could you not have me go through with this? This is too much. I don't mean to belittle it, but you see a little discussion there in the Garden of Gethsemane. And yet, he triumphantly says, nevertheless, not my will, but I want to do your will. What a picture for being in a challenging role. Now, with that in mind, turn back to Titus 2. Now, let me read Jesus into Titus 2:4. Okay? Our Lord focused his entire life on fulfilling God's will. Do you remember what Philippians 2 says? He took upon himself the form of a servant, was made in the likeness of men. He humbled himself and did all this. He who was in the very essence of God, he is God of the same essence, one with the Father. All of that, humbled himself and took upon himself this role as a servant. And it was in fact, Hebrews 5 says he learned obedience, which is another thing. It's just boggling to think about how did Jesus, who is God, learn to obey? That's challenging. I'm glad we're not on that tonight. But our Lord focused his entire life on fulfilling God's will. In a similar fashion, because the word is the same, a wife should focus her life on the home, because God has designed the family to be that sphere of her responsibility. That doesn't mean she should spend 24 hours a day there, however. It doesn't mean that the home is a captive cell that she's tied in. If she ever leaves, she's disobedient. A lot of women act like they don't even like their homes because they're never there. Even women that have children. Ask. I remember interviewing one young person. And I don't do this on purpose, and wasn't tricking them. I said, how often do you eat at home? And they looked at me and smiled. They said, my mom only cooks 2 meals a month at home. We eat out all the rest. So I didn't believe them. So I asked the dad. I went out to lunch with him. I said, how often do you eat at home? He said, my wife only cooks 2 meals a month at home. I thought, how can that young lady ever see how a mother is supposed to operate? How can she ever see what her mother is supposed to be if her mother is never a worker at home? She'll want to work at a restaurant the rest of her life, I guess. because she grew up in restaurants. I don't know. I mean, I guess if you want to eat at restaurants. But it doesn't mean a woman should spend 24 hours a day captured at home. The woman in Proverbs 31 left her home when she needed to buy a field, when she needed supplies, yet those trips were for the benefit of her family. She poured her life into her family. She woke up early. She went to bed late for the sake of those in it. Now, mothers, do your girls see this kind of focus? That you say, I'm going to be a home worker, just like Jesus' will was to do, his work was to do the will of the Father. I'm going to do God's calling, and I'm going to be the greatest home worker I can be. Do your girls see that in you? Or is it, cook? Don't like that. Can't you take me out ever, honey? What will that produce in your children? I mean, how will they ever learn to do all these other things God's going to reward, like entertaining and caring for if you don't like the home, and that is your base of operation, and it's also what God rewards you for, how will you raise up the next generation that's going to love it? And that's what we see deteriorating in our world.